One of my favorite colors, like an aqua blue, blue-green, I think. I'll have to show you. I'm watching Perry Mason. Yeah, he just found a dead body, and he said rigor mortis, or he said rigors has started to set in, which comes so many hours after death, and which is the stiffening of the joints. That guy I told you that had passed away in his chair, he was all stiff, and they had to flatten him out, get him on the body bag in the funeral home, and when they did, he made this like that sound. So Goo's in here with me, nobody else. So if I put you on pause, it's because I'm watching Perry Mason. It goes off at 10, so 30 more minutes. It's one that I don't remember. It had something to do with a comic strip and a painting. Could very well be information for like a current day lawyer show. I think Matlock with Andy Griffith was supposed to be, he tried to make it like Perry Mason, but they just can't get the excitement that this show has. And the way that they act. Nobody can do it like Raymond Burr. I think Bongo wants in. Hogan's Heroes. Nana used to like Hogan's Heroes. And one day at Sam's they had the box set for, I think, first couple of seasons or something. It might have been the entire series. And I got it for, and I wonder what happened to that. I mean, I guess I could have it here. But yeah, what happened to Nana's DVDs that she had? Not tapes. She did have some tapes too, and all the tapes I had I got rid of. Someday those VHS tapes would be worth a lot of money, and I threw them all out. I had a bunch of 8-track music tapes too that I got. I had 2 big cases of 8-track tapes. When I moved from the Green Swamp to Lake Wales, I set them out. It looked like an eviction because I put all sorts of stuff out at the curb. The 2 cases with those tapes in them and everything. Lamps, chairs, anything I thought the garbage man could take. It was back when they'd pick up whatever you threw out there. And the guy that picked up your household garbage would also throw like a chair in the back of the truck. They didn't care. I've seen them throw couches in the back. And it's like they love to see it get crushed, by that back part of the truck. It makes you wonder if anybody's ever got caught in the back of one of those. They pull the lever, and the part that's down here, a part from up top comes down, and it starts to compress it, and then the part that's in here lifts up and flips out, and then this becomes the compressor. So those have like a big piston in them, those garbage trucks. When they go to the dump, the whole back opens up. Then there's this piston that just pushes all that trash out. So it all gets compressed in the back of that truck. And I guess that they still do. I'm talking about the old trucks. They used to come by when I was growing up. The really garbage trucks haven't changed much, have they? Except for the ones that pick up the bins. And the interesting thing is that they haven't been using that truck to pick up our trash. They've been using the 2 guys on a regular truck with the thing that comes down in the back that crushes it. But there's this thing on the back that they hook the can to that automatically dumps it because they're way too heavy for people to empty. You just had Neo just came in. I might have to start limiting them coming in here because they drop too many hairs. I bring hairs in here just on my socks that accumulate in the corners and under the bed. You wouldn't believe that I don't let cats in here with as much cat hair as comes in. Comes in on me, on my socks, my clothes, I guess. And we might see some sparks fly when he gets up on the bed with Goo. Maybe not. Maybe they'll maybe they'll get along okay, right? Neo likes to crawl back over toward the corner. actually got some good sleep last night. I laid down and I was like, wonder if my joints and my body's gonna hurt. And I laid there, and within like a minute I was asleep because my joints weren't hurting. Yay! Thank you for praying for me, everybody. And all those who have gone before me from the family, thank you for praying for me. And praying for all of us. Thank you. And thank you, Lord, for letting them do it. Because you know you can't pray to dead people or pray to people that have passed on. They're not really dead. They're alive, but just not in the way we think. But you have to ask God to allow them to intercede for you. Because they can't do anything that God doesn't allow them to do. So, thank you, God, for letting my mom, on her anniversary, intercede on my behalf and allowing me to get some sleep. And I slept so good, I don't even remember getting up to go to the bathroom. I don't think I did. Until about 11:30, like an hour before I start getting up. That's all that's going on here on the 22nd day of January. Actually, on the camera, I got a flashing light right here. And a little tape indicator right there, flashing. I should show you what it says. It's just amazing that it gives me such a clean output on the video. Is this coming out okay? This $12 microphone, I got two of them for $24. That's with shipping. And one of them went to Angel, and I've got this one here. The latest one I got, of course, had the broken USB port. And I did try the one that Angel's got, and I know that it works, but I never did really look real close at the USB port, so hope it's still good. Who transported the decedent's body to Hollywood from Port Orange? The big reveal's coming when they reveal the true murderer, and he gets his client off scot-free. Hey, don't bite. I'll give you a back scratch. Want me to give you a back scratch? Give you a back scratch? Or you want your face scratched? A little bit closer to the ear. A little bit closer. That's it. Good. Right there. Right there. A little bit higher. A little bit higher. A little bit higher. A little bit higher. A little bit under the chin. How about under the chin? Right? How about under the chin? Under the chin. What? 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 You're going to keep it low? Keep it gentle. Keep it gentle there. Ooh, this can get hung up on your collar. This is meant to scratch your back. Goo-goo. Here, see? See? How about your chest? Huh? How about your chest? Hmm? Hmm? This back scratcher, this scratch backer, is it time to talk in reverse? This scratch backer, sack batcher, the sack batcher, this came from my grandmother's house, so it's your great grandmother. This was in her house when I was a kid. I remembered it. It's made out of a piece of, what do you call that? grows like weeds in Miami. And I guess they got it in Hawaii too. In a minute I'll remember. I just got brain bleed or something. I forgot what this is. This is in focus, and he is out of focus back there. So this has a little chain on it, and it had a little tag at one time that said had something to do with the Shriners. I think you know, they have this, one of the symbols of the Shriners is the Buddha, the fat Buddha. And my Nana had lots of these little fat Buddhas around, made out of glass ashtrays with the little Buddha in them. And I don't know why the Buddha, is that what it's called, the Buddha? The Asian man with the big tummy that's sitting on the ground with his legs crossed. What is that called? Is that Buddha? The smiling Buddha. Supposedly if you touch it, if you're a woman, it's good for fertility. But this came from something to do with the Shriners in bamboo. That's what that's called. Why couldn't I think of that? Bamboo. But it had something to do with the Shriners, and I still remember that to this day. And it does have like cheap plastic parts on this end and the shoehorn. I don't use it for the shoehorn. After I take a shower in the evenings, a lot of times my back itches. You know, you ever have one of those spots on your back which just itches real bad? Well, this, you know, the tops of these plastic hands, I probably should make something out of wood. What do you think? I try to carve something out of wood to be a back scratcher. But it definitely has to have fingers. This works really good. But just in case you don't know, this is like 70 years old. This piece of bamboo with these little plastic pieces. 70 years old. Nowhere on it am I aware of does it say made in China or anything like that. And on the tag that used to be on there, it said something about compliments of the Mahi Shriners or whatever it is. My step-grandfather, he was the one who had the sheet metal shop in Opelika. Hialeah? No, it was Hialeah. It was like between Miami and the Everglades. And there was a canal out behind his shop. And I remember going there with Johnny once. And there was a pickle plant down past the canal, and we used to think that they fermented pickles in that water, in the canal water. That's why pickles were this like weird looking green, because the water had that greenish tint to it. But I can only remember being there twice. Once was after he passed on. He was the one who felt like he had a lot of gas. Told his secretary he had a lot of gas. You've heard, I'm going to tell you this story again real quick. My step-grandfather. I won't tell you his name because I might use his name for a password, because nobody else knows who my step-grandfather was. And he had the fabricating plant in Hialeah. And after he passed on, we went to his office. I was there with my mother and I think my grandmother, God rest her soul. And in the water cooler there was a tiny little refrigerator at the bottom. And when I opened it, you know, just a tiny little square built into the cold water cooler. It was like a refrigerator, tiny little thing. And it had a jar of olives in it. I suppose that was for making martinis. Because he was much more wealthy than I think he let my grandmother know. And you know, that's probably why she had a shop at 7th Avenue down near the canal where I used to shop. She had a second-hand shop. It was called Betty's Whatnot Shop. And I can remember a bunch of times going there with my mother. And I don't think she had it for very long, maybe a year or two. It was maybe when I was 4 years old, 3 or 4. Hey, because I remember going there with my mom and going into the back and looking for toys and things like that. But my grandmother would buy stuff from garage sales and rummage sales. what they would call them. Church would have what's called a rummage sale, where everybody would just bring in their junk and throw it on the tables in the cafeteria. People, they'd advertise it as a rummage sale. And my mom took me there once when I was 4, the Anglican church my grandmother was a member of. And I ended up buying like a little $1 toy my mom got for me. Because that's all I cared about, right? I didn't care about the clothes or the figurines. I wanted to see little toys for a 4-year-old. So she had the Betty's Whatnot shop right there on 7th Avenue. It's almost just down a block from the Bennett McBride and Ulm funeral home. And that's where her funeral was held at, except that, I guess Mr. McBride had died and it was only Bennett and Ulm funeral parlor. That's where my brother's visitation was at, and that's where my grandmother's visitation was at, both at the same funeral home, just by the canal where I used to fish at all the time. Isn't that interesting? But when she closed out the Whatnot shop, yeah, Betty, I guess Elizabeth, one of the nicknames for Elizabeth is Betty, and that's why she called it Betty's Whatnot shop. But when she closed it all, bongos here. But when she closed that store, a lot of the junk she had there, she put in her back room or in her garage. And my step-grandfather used to do, before he got into the sheet metal business, I think he's the one that started my dad in the well drilling business and gave my dad that old beat up 56 Ford truck and a well drilling rig that was like handmade, hand welded and everything. It was very interesting. You want to come up here and let me scratch you? And sat in our yard most of the time. I never remember drilling a well with my dad. And it's an amazing system how they used to do it. And the most complicated part was I do remember, we drilled a well out near my grandmother's house. I don't remember drilling it, but I remember we suctioned it out because you had to have a special pump, because when you pump out all the slurry and the rocks that are down in there, because you have to go through coral rock to get to the water table. And the pump has to bring up actually like stones and rocks. And I remember doing that with my dad. So I guess her well was plugged up or something. But he did that, well drilling. I think it was called Apex Engineering. Apex? What is the one from the Roadrunner in Wile E. Coyote? It's not Apex, it's Acme. It's either Acme Engineering or Apex Engineering. It said on the side of the truck that was all kind of worn off, and it had my dad's home phone number on it. Apex Engineering. We still installed sprinkler systems, but we didn't do any wells that I can remember. And then he got into the tree business. My step-grandfather did. And then all this time he's going up the ranks of the Masons. And when his tree business went out, they planted all these trees that they had left over in their backyard. So his backyard, right on the corner there of 143rd Street, was all built up with all these trees that he had planted. And I remember the hurricane came through and knocked a bunch of them down. When we were kids, we went over there, and it was just so much fun crawling in and out of the branches of those trees. Kind of like kids playing in Lake Wales when the trees were laying down. You know how fun it is to climb on the limbs when they're laying this way instead of that way? And they're big enough to climb and go up a little bit high. And I remember when we cut it down, we cut through he had a chainsaw and a winch. He had all the stuff for doing this tree service. At one time he had one of these tree things where he could haul them around on the back of a truck. And they cut through this huge ficus tree. It was about 6 feet around. And in the very middle of it, there was a metal can, a 5-gallon bucket that the tree had grown through when it came up. So evidently it sat in their backyard long enough for this tree to grow through the can and then around the can. Because in the middle of this huge piece of trunk was this 5-gallon can ring. Isn't that interesting? So as he went up through Freemasonry, I guess he got more and more jobs that kicked back more money to him, and then he ended up with the sheet metal business. And then that got my dad busy as a union sheet metal. I don't think my step-grandfather's shop wasn't a union shop, from what I understand, because my dad never worked for him. I remember my dad working for a guy named Mr. Conklin Sheet Metal, because I can remember my mom once or twice before I started school. I was maybe 5 years old. I drove there with my mom to pick my dad up after work. So I guess his truck, that was back when his truck, you know, we put 2 motors in that truck. And back when his truck was down, my mom would have to take him to work and pick him up. But it was just halfway down to Miami, so it was maybe a 20-minute trip. So yeah, somehow he got the sheet metal shop. He got the support of the Masons, and they gave him the jobs, the big jobs on Miami Beach for the Fontainebleau Hotel. And a lot of those big hotels down there, he did the buffet lines, which were all stainless steel with, you know, those hot trays where the hot water runs into, and then they put the trays into the hot water to keep you don't want the food to cook, but you want it to stay really hot. The easiest way to do that without overcooking it is to put it in boiling water or near boiling water. And that's why a lot of these trays and these buffets you'll see will be sitting in these slots that have water in them or steam. Of course, it still dries them out when they got a lid on them, unless there's a lid on them. But that way it keeps them hot, because the health department goes in there with a thermometer and actually sticks it in those stainless steel bins to make sure that the temperature's up to snuff. So he got into the sheet metal business and got that shop in Hialeah. We went there after he died. I was going to tell you again how he died. One day he was middle of the morning, I think it was, in my Nana's book. It's in my drawer in the front of the front living room. Her little notebook has when my grandfather died in 1937. She wrote, it was like a little credenza, and she put in there that John died at such and such a time in Hialeah Hospital on this date. But he told his secretary that he felt like he had to relieve some gas. And you know the rest of the story. I'll repeat it. So he goes into the bathroom thinking he's going to pass gas. He must have been having chest pain. And a lot of times it feels like you have really bad indigestion. And he went in there to relieve himself. And the secretary heard a thump, a bang and a thump. And they couldn't get the door open, so they called the fire department. They pushed their way in, and they found him laying on the floor. I thought he was dead. I didn't think he died at the hospital. But evidently he lived long enough to get to the hospital. But he had his pants down around his ankles. And when he fell, he hit his head on the corner of the sink or the bathroom cabinet, and then went down. So he had this mark on his head. And I don't think I had showed you the pictures of her standing by his grave right after they buried him, where he had all these businesses that sent him multiple things of flowers. He had the most flowers I've ever seen on anybody's grave. And he had, I guess, several funeral services. He had one that the Masons put on for him, along with the Shriners. And that, I guess, was a private one. Because it says in his obituary that he had a visitation scheduled just for the Masons. But my grandmother said that they found $3,000 or $5,000 in cash in his pocket. She says he never carried that amount of cash with him. And that she had suspected he was having an affair with his secretary, who was maybe 15, 20 years younger than him, because he's a rich man, right? he used to smoke unfiltered Camel cigarettes. These cigarettes had no filter on it. It was just tobacco. You know, and he used to love eating stuff with real butter in it. You know, my Nana would cook with real butter, like salted butter. And I guess that back then it wasn't a big thing to have coronary blockages from plaque buildup. And now they can pre-diagnose that stuff, and they didn't have stents back then, and they didn't have bypass surgery. So I don't even think they could detect that you had blockages in your heart. You know, if you had a mild heart attack, that's about the only thing they could do is say, well, you're prone to more, so you have to change your diet, etc., etc. So he passed away. They had a big funeral. Got pictures of my Nana and him at the Tampa Shriners conventions when they would have them there. And interesting, the Shriners and the Masons are kind of all interconnected, and they take care of each other business-wise. You know, you always, if you have to throw business to somebody, you throw it to a fellow Mason, which I can understand, because, you know, veterans kind of do the same thing. I want to give another veteran my business rather than just giving it to anybody off the street, if I can. It's just the way, I guess, humanity is, right? So he had a leased car, and that went away. It was a white station wagon, and it left my Nana with a white Ford F100 station wagon, 1962 model. And I remember my dad took the top end off of that car, and it was all full of sludge. So my grandmother would only take the car to the store and back. But then she gave up driving. And my dad thought he'd keep the car, took the top of the motor off, saw that sludge in there, and decided to get rid of it. So they sold my grandmother's car. And then my mother and her sister, Marion, would take my grandmother once or twice a week to the grocery store. And she used to love it when we go to, it was Biscayne Deli there at 143rd and 7th Avenue. And I remember her, I took her there a couple of times myself, and I remember her always buying like a quarter pound of thin sliced boiled ham. Back when you could, they didn't always serve deli meats that way. But when they did, I remember she used to always have lunch, a ham sandwich for lunch, because she was diabetic. Don't think she had medication. She might have, but she was always like anal about her diet. You know, she was always transferring this to that so she could have this. She'd give this up so she could have a piece of candy. And the only time, of course, she didn't do that was when she had. When I'd get her a Burger King, like a cheeseburger and a chocolate shake. And she'd just say, to hell with it. I'm going to eat this even if it kills me. And in the end, talked about this before, none of that killed her. It was going in for bypass surgery that killed her at 82, 83, 84 years old. Should have never went. Should have never went for the surgery. My sister convinced her to have it, and that was the same doctor that did my mom's heart surgery. And she was sitting up in the chair at the hospital after the surgery. It was successful, bypass. She had successful. I'm sure it shows up on the doctor's stats as a success, right? Because she survived the surgery and was recuperating at the hospital. She was sitting up in the chair and just passed away around noon. Just out of the blue, sitting in the chair, her heart just stopped. Isn't that interesting? And that's the story again, where my aunt says that she got a call from my grandmother at the hospital, and that what she thought was the hospital, and that my grandmother was on the other end, but it was a very staticky call. And she said, Mom, is that you? Is that you? And she heard her say that that she's going to be okay, that everything was all right. And then it disconnected, but it wasn't a clear call, and it turned out she'd already was dead by then. It's like a half hour after she died, she got that call. That's what my Aunt Marion said. May she rest in peace. And it was her husband, Dan, my Uncle Dan. Got pictures of him too, by the way. Your cousin Danny and Diane, the twins. Your great cousins, I guess, my cousins. That's their parents, Dan and Marion. You know, Dan had the property. He did a lot of work for the Catholic Church down in Miami-Dade County. He was a had a construction company, and did a lot of work for the Diocese of Miami, even though he wasn't Catholic. So he had a place out in the Big Cypress Swamp where he would fly a plane in, and it was there that he crashed one evening as he was coming in for the weekend. And had a 15-year-old with him that also died. And his son Danny went out there when the plane, they heard something in the woods, and he knew that the plane should have been there. And he said a cold blast of air hit him as he got closer to it, and it told him to turn around. And it turned out that his dad had been cut literally in half. Yeah, plane crashes are not nice because they're like really thin sheet metal. And it's like being in a blender. It just cuts you to pieces when all that metal just gets churned up. And the 15-year-old was dead, and they turned out that when they autopsied the 15-year-old, they didn't know it at the time, but the 15-year-old had juvenile leukemia and was terminally ill, and they didn't know it. It was the son of one of the other people that had property up there in the Big Cypress. Well, that's my 5 minutes of ranting today, telling you stuff you probably heard of before. But thanks for the prayers, everybody that's gone before us and everybody that's still here, because I'm feeling much better. Goo and Neo, say hi. Stephanie, can you hear? She's here. Can you hear her high-pitched squeaky voice? I'm going to let it go at that at 32 minutes. Let you off early today. I love you guys. Thanks for spending time with me. I'm looking right at you, talking to you. I'm here talking because of you. So thanks for giving me this opportunity. And if my grandkids are out there, I'm going to say hi to you years from now. Hopefully that Republicans send money to Ukraine so that my grandkids are not fighting in Sweden and Poland in 20 years. The Russians. Everybody's got to do the right thing on this next election. You know, I'm sorry to say that you're going to have to vote Democrat to make sure that the Russians get put down, because the Republicans just are not. Doesn't seem like they're focused on that. Our children, grandchildren will be fighting and dying in Europe if the Russians win in Ukraine. So do the right thing. Get out and vote. I love you guys. I always will. God loves you. And may we be reasonably happy in this life, supremely happy forever in the next. Where did Goo go? Bongo and Goo are waiting at the door. I'm going to let them out. I love you guys. Thanks for spending time again with me and letting me be a part of your life this 22nd day of January. The year of our Lord 2024. Crazy, isn't it? Bye, you guys.